Good day and welcome to this segment of the System Thinking Certification Program about Kumu. The reason that I I'm going to spend a few minutes and talk a little bit about why I wanted to actually include a segment about Kumu in the program, and then Jeff Mohr, the co-founder of Kumu Systems, is going to talk and provide some examples of different things that they have developed with Kumu and things that they're intending in the future. And it was a very insightful presentation on Tuesday, and I would expect today to be pretty much the same. So for those of you who remember the About Systems Thinking World video and that segment of the program and how Systems Thinking World came to be what it is today, it's sort of been a relentless quest to figure out how to craft an environment that provided a well-orchestrated set of learning threads for people to work through it at their own pace, though the content was chunked into small digestible segments so that there wasn't an overload, but there was still a way to actually get a sense of what the overall program was and where people were within it. And this current incarnation of the Systems Thinking Certification Program an attempt has been made to implement it in probably 6 or 8 different software environments over the last 4.5 years or so. And each one seems to get a bit closer, but not quite there until Kumu arrived, and I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. So it's actually, the result of numerous trial and error efforts to actually figure out how to craft something that accomplished what the, I guess you could say, the vision was. And because you have operated in it during the whole process of the certification program, I thought it appropriate to actually you have an opportunity to get into Kumu from a behind-the-scenes perspective to really understand the capabilities of it, as opposed to simply interacting with it the way that you have in the certification program from simply an end-user perspective. I mean, I am part of my fascination with Kumu is the fact that a person can actually become productive within the Kumu environment in 10 minutes or less. You can actually begin to develop a relationship diagram, though the package itself or the set of capabilities that it provides is so unbelievably deep that after 6 or 8 months, I'm still discovering things and going, wow, I didn't know that was there. Which I think is a great credit to the developers. I can recall numerous software applications that I have used over the years where I really liked version 1.0, and by the time the developers got to version 3 or 4, I couldn't stand the product anymore because they had just overloaded it to such an extent that the neat thing, or the bells and whistles that they added actually got in the way of doing the mainstream productive things. So I think you'll see from the various and sundry different projects that Jeff is going to share with you, that it has a very broad set of capabilities, of which I actually only scratched the surface of in putting together the Systems Thinking Certification Program that you have been working through in learning threads for the past 6 weeks or so. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and turn the presentation over to Jeff Mohr and have at it. And Jeff, the tabs that we went looking for on Tuesday are already displayed on the menu bar.
Okay, great. And then are you going to transfer the control of the mouse too?
You got it.
Perfect. Okay, great. Well, thanks for the introduction, Gene. And let's see, for everyone listening in, we all have a lot to thank Gene about in terms of continuing to push the Kumu platform along and hold our feet to the fire to making a usable and valuable tool. So a lot of the stuff I'll walk through today has been part of his contribution. So it's been great working with you, Gene. So let me give
the
a little bit.
The feeling is extremely mutual.
So before I hop into some of the examples and actually show you kind of the depth of Kumu, I wanted to take a step back and talk a little bit about kind of where Kumu came from. So Kumu was born, kind of the idea of Kumu, around 3 years ago. It really came out of some of our work in the social impact and philanthropy space. So I worked for the family office for the founders at eBay. And what we kept seeing was it was really easy to spend a lot of money trying to improve some of these tough social issues. But it was also really hard to make a lasting difference by doing that. And so we tried to dig into kind of why that was happening. And what we kept coming back to was this idea of relationships really being at the core and not really having great tools to be able to map these relationships and really understand them. And so we started first really trying to tackle the idea of how do you map relationships among people. So understanding networks, being able to see who's connected to who the key influencers are, and who you should really work with to try to get policy changes to happen. And from there we realized that that's not enough. So we needed to keep going further, and that's where this whole idea of doing systems mapping, adding into that relational understanding among people, this idea of how are all the different factors related in any given situation to find out where do you really want to try to intervene. And so what we noticed, there were some tools that were out there for both of those uses, but most people were kind of doing one or the other. And what we really tried to do was create an environment where you could marry the two together. And so you could have this understanding and this view of who's in your network, how are they connected, how might you reach them, but more importantly, how do you really understand what you're trying to reach them for? What's that lever that you're going to go to someone and use all the knowledge about that network to say, hey, we want you to support X, we want you to support Y. And so we continue to head in that direction. Still very much a work in progress. We're under active development, and so as people have feedback, you'll see, I'm sure you'll see the interface has already probably changed once or twice as you've been going through the certification program, and so we'll do our best to continue to not kind of add additional features that ruin the core, but how do we keep making it easier and easier to use for everyone. And as people have questions throughout, I believe Gene's going to be watching the chat window so he can interrupt me, but feel free to send anything over at any time. So I'm going to start first by walking through the Hawaii Quality of Life maps. And so a little bit of background. These maps were done as a collaboration between Hawaii Business Magazine and the Amidiar Group and Hawaii Leadership Forum. And the way to think about what Hawaii Business Magazine usually did was they would produce a series of infographics and data measures on how quality of life was doing in Hawaii. But it didn't really get at the root causes of what was going on. And so the partnership formed between Hawaii Leadership Forum and the business magazine to say, can we actually use systems mapping to get at the root causes of kind of why quality of life continues to do good in some areas and not so great in other areas? And really hoping to use this as a first step to spark this conversation to say, hey, how can we as policymakers, both inside, outside of government, really use systems thinking to improve the solutions that we're trying to implement on a kind of yearly basis. And so what you'll see, this is, I would call kind of the simplest of the many different maps that are within this project. They created different levels. This one zooms in on just the idea of civic engagement to make it an easier entry point for people. And then as you see, we'll step back, and there's one map that actually tries to map this entire dynamic of Hawaii's quality of life. And so you're familiar with the layout from the certification course, but the way to think about it is this right side of the map always has the visual, and then the left side is really meant for the narrative. And the narrative part's really important to us. So this idea of how do we both engage people analytically by doing the act of systems thinking and systems mapping, but also how do we engage them emotionally by telling a story that goes along with that systems map. And so one of the things you'll see on this map is you have these dotted underlined links. And so one of our early challenges was to say, how do we unite the narrative with the visual rather than them just being side by side? How can we take it a step further so that as I'm talking about what's really going on with civic engagement, you know what I'm talking about within the map. As I'm talking about Band-Aid solutions, you don't have to guess if I'm in the upper right corner or the lower left corner. You can actually hover on these links and be taken right to that part of the map. So if I hover on citizen engagement, you'll see it now brings me to that part of the map. And so the label is actually citizen participation on the map itself, but Kumu gives you that flexibility to break the label link text with what it actually links to. If I click on citizen engagement, it'll actually take me into the profile too for that element. So it makes it nice where you can kind of click and walk through a map. On this map, ideally we'd want this built out so that citizen participation actually had a definition. There was some information about data and background, what had actually happened with that given factor over time. But what this allows you to do is at least include and save some of that information along with your map. So from here, I'm actually going to switch, and we're going to go one level more complex. And so this next map is the social and cultural map. And so what this does is this is actually now bringing in this concept of actual loops into the map. And so as I zoom in, what you'll see is we have something like B4 down here. So if I hover on B4, you'll see that'll highlight those connections that are part of that loop. And so the way to think about it is you have these circles, tolerance is an element, the connection itself is there, and then you can have a loop, which is a collection of loops. And so if I click on B4, you'll notice that this is actually has its own profile as well. So you can save a narrative on that loop. And again, this is instead of just having it be, hey, a loop is the result of each of these three connections, and I have to click on each one to learn more about what those dynamics might be, you can now actually tell a story about what is this bouncing loop. And so in this case, this is aloha. It talks about kind of the culture of aloha and how it reduces the potential for destructive conflict, but it's really meant to be able to build these profiles out. And these can become really interactive. Jeans showed you how there can be links, there can be videos that are embedded, you can open up other content within Kumu, and it's just really meant to house all of that interactive content so you can give people enough background so they have the same understanding of what you're talking about, and you can actually engage them emotionally in why this kind of balancing loop may be important. One of the other challenges we had too was this idea of systems maps tending to be overwhelming at first blush. And I'm not arguing that this map isn't overwhelming at first blush either. Systems maps just in general tend to cause people's eyes to glaze over if you see them all at once. And so one of the things we're continuing to work on is how can we do a better job of allowing a map to unfold one step at a time. And so for example, I can click and hold on Culture of Aloha, and that allows me to just see that item and one step out. And so we call that a focusing behavior. What's nice is you can use it and you can click and hold in other elements to expand out from there and kind of tell this step-by-step story. And if you click and hold on the background, it'll actually bring everything back. So if you've ever been using a map and you wondered why did your map completely disappear for a second, it's probably because you focused on an element unintentionally by clicking and holding on it. And then if you just click and hold on the background, it'll clear it. And if you click and hold on any label, it'll allow you to zoom in just to those factors. And so, for example, this one, R5, some of the larger loops can be hard to track unless you're able to focus in like this. And so by holding R5, we can filter down to just those that are a part of R5, and it also includes R1 since both of these elements are actually part of this R5 loop. So from here I'm going to step back and go one layer further out, which is the overall map of the quality of life map, just to show you how you can use some of the qualitative data that you can save on profiles to size and decorate the map. So in this overall map, you'll see there's some connections that are red, some that are green, and some that are black. And what these are meant to do is have this analysis of what loops are at play and what's the effect right now on quality of life. Unfortunately, this map is a little bit probably more negative than we'd like in terms of how many red connections there are. But the way to think about how this map works is it's essentially a way of connecting the loops that are part of all the other different maps. And what I mean by that is if I zoom in, you'll see this loop. I'll click it. You probably can't read that on your side, but it says R11 unmet needs loop. And you'll see that there's a link in here, and if I click on it, it would actually take me to the map that we just saw, social and cultural, and it'll actually show you that expanded set of elements and connections that represent R11, but this provides a way to actually zoom up one other step above this and give an understanding of how all those different loops kind of play together. And what I really wanted to show here is this idea of these connections. If I click on one of those connections, you can see this tag is saved that says hinder. And if I click on one of the green connections, you'll see there's a tag that's saved enable. And so that's one of the things that we've really tried to do with Kumu is this idea of being able to save information on the profile and then decorate based on that so you can have it jump to life. Rather than having to click on that connection and see that it's enabling improvements in quality of life, we can actually say, hey, Kumu, anytime enable is a tag, color that connection green so that we can see which part of the maps are enabling quality of life. So Gene, I'm going to move on to the PayPal Mafia map next, but just wanted to check and see if we have any questions.
No, not at this time, Jeff.
Okay. So this map, this is a fun example that I like to use. It's of the PayPal Mafia, and the way to think about the PayPal Mafia is it's all the guys who were working at PayPal right before they were acquired, and they had gone on to start some of the most influential companies in the Silicon Valley after that. So things like Elon Musk with Tesla, Reid Hoffman and LinkedIn, a number of different companies. And so this map just gives you this visual sense, a little bit more like an infographic of saying who are all those people and what are the companies that they're connected to. I'm going to click on Reid Hoffman so you can see what his profile looks like, because it's a great example of kind of all the different ways you can use the profile to add additional detail. So you see now on the left side, up top we have the label. Right below that is person, which is the element type. You'll see that elements and connections have types in Kumu. Those are really meant to make it easy to categorize what you're mapping and filter them later on or decorate based on that. So we really encourage people using those. And this next part is what we call the description. And so what the description is usually used for is a bio, especially if it's a person. So you can see here we have information, we have links out to other sites, and we can include all of the background we need about who is Reid Hoffman. This next section down here, PayPal Mafia, VC, Tech, you'll see those are actually the tags. And so the way to think about tags are kind of short, unlabeled pieces of information. So tech in and of itself is sufficiently fine to define what we're trying to save. If we look down at these attributes below, these are, think of these as labeled versions of that. So if we had 4.4, it wouldn't make a lot of sense to save 4.4 as a type because we need to know that, hey, this is the net worth and this is billions. And so there's usually a lot of questions around how to use tags versus attributes. And so that separation is usually a good one to use. So within this, you can save lots of different things. Net worth, for example. So this is a numerical attribute. And what's great is you can actually use these attributes to size and decorate your map. So if we look off to the right again, people, each of these circles for people are sized by their net worth. So Reid Hoffman has 4.4 billion. If I click Elon and then scroll down, because he's a longer profile, he has 6.7 billion, and so of course his circle is sized bigger. And the scales, they can be used in a couple different ways. You can do size scales, and so they can actually just be, is the circle bigger or smaller? And you can actually use color scales as well. So say you had percent complete that you were tracking, or maybe a 1 through 10 progress measure. You could actually say, hey, I want 10 to show up as dark green to signify that it's complete, and then 0 to show up as white. So you can start to see this visual gradient about how progress is kind of working, whether it's in your systems map or any other type of map, even if it's mapping relationships on different tasks within a project. We can keep scrolling down, things like influence, citizenship, interests. This map's not editable right now, but if I was to click on high, you'd actually get drop downs for low, medium, or high, so you can define the choices. And there's just a lot of flexibility here to save whatever information you need, whether it's qualitative or quantitative. And just expanding on this idea of how we can use colors and how we can use scaling, this is another great example. This map wasn't originally built in Kumu. It was actually built by the New York Times data visualization team. But the way to think about how this map works is the circles are actually sized by GDP. So if I click on France, you'll see GDP of 2.6 is saved. The connections are sized by the amount owed between two countries. So if I click United States and China, you can see the amount owed value. And then the coloring is actually done by this qualitative attribute, which is the level of worrisome, or how worrisome it is. So something like United States and Germany, the worrisome level is no, whereas something like Greece, if I click here, has a high worrisome level. And so again, essentially what you can do is Kumu is say, hey, if it's worrisome equals high, make it this bright orange color so that really jumps out at people. If it's medium, make it this softer yellow, and if it's low or limited, make it this softer kind of tan or gray. So again, you get a lot of flexibility there in how you'd like to decorate and what you'd like to bring to the surface visually. And for example, if we wanted to here, if you just hover on Greece, we could actually click and hold. I think this is so interconnected that by focusing in on Greece, the only thing we take away is China, but you get a sense of how you can use those focusing features to narrow in on part of the map. One of the things you'll notice too, and you may have noticed it through the course already, this toolbar at the bottom, this really has a lot of the features that you're going to be using, whether it's filtering or focusing. And so since I just clicked and held on Greece, it activated this focus mode. And so you'll see I'm now focused on Greece at 1 degree. Instead, I could go and click selected if I wanted to, and that'll only show me Greece. But if you're seeing things happen in your map, the toolbar is always a great place to look to get this notification. It'll turn blue if it's turned on, and you can always look down there to change it. So some other kind of fun ways that people use Kumu. It's used in the infographic space, like I just showed you. This is more of an investigative reporting type of use. The Rob Ford kind of Toronto mayor debacle was happening right as we were launching some of the sharing abilities, and so there's a number of maps that were actually created. And you can just see here, again, the left side's used to tell some of the story, and you can zoom in and see in this case, the legend in the lower left corner, so you can see the red represents arrested, the gray actually represents deceased, and then the soft purple represents who holds elected office. And so this person just used it to show all of those relationships that are really going on between Rob Ford and some of the shady characters that were involved in that picture. And it wouldn't be without having some other fun examples. For example, this is the Academy Awards map that we did. This one really helps to highlight kind of how each of the movies were involved in the different awards, whether it's Best Actor, Best Actress, and so you can just start to see this connection. And what's great is if I click on something like Dallas Buyers Club, what you'll see is here on the left-hand side, we actually have the video embedded. And again, this has been a key focus for us, is saying, like, how can we include more multimedia, whether you're dropping in images. For videos, this is kind of a fun example to watch the trailer, but we see systems maps becoming even more effective by either embedding a video to have someone actually walk through and explain a systems map, having an interview with someone who's actually sitting, kind of think of it as a stakeholder interview. So you can really get people to empathize with what's going on and the dynamics that you're understanding. And so the more that we can do that, and again, hit kind of all ranges of people from like emotional to analytical, I think it'll help us to be a lot more effective in kind of the change that we're trying to make in the world. And for this one too, you can see that also has the box office numbers. These are a little bit outdated, but Gravity definitely takes the cake with this one with 269 million. So the next map, I'm actually going to show you back to some of the roots around this idea of how do we map networks of people. This isn't your typical social network analysis map of mapping collaboration or innovation or who people turn to for ideas. But this was really done as a survey that was sent out before a conference in Denver around something called Collective Impact. But what you can see is right now they're not connected at all. If I click on one of the elements, you'll see the profile changes, and you have the short bio, you have information on what initiatives they're a part of, maybe what their geographic focus is, what they have skills or experience in with, organizations, and where the skills and experience comes up is this idea of, like, how do you help matchmaking across networks? How do you have someone who wants to know more about evaluation get connected with someone who knows a lot about evaluation? And so that's why they stored a lot of that information. And so what we can do with something called clustering is that we can actually turn that information from the profile into something that's actually used to create the network structure on the map. So in this case, we can cluster by Mile High Connects, which is the Collective Impact-ish initiative, and maybe the geographic focus, which for Matthew Berry is Metro Denver. And so I'll walk through that now so you can see what happens as we do that. So I'm going to click Collective Impact-ish initiative, and what this is essentially doing is it's taking that data on the profile and now drawing it as part of the network structure. So you can see how people are connected. Obviously, there's a lot of people who are actually part of multiple different collective impact initiatives. Someone like Bill Fulton, who's actually one of the key people behind the event, is actually involved in, it looks like, 4 different collective impact initiatives. And if I click on geographic focus, we can layer in multiple ones. We don't have to just see the collective impact initiative. Now we're actually seeing a map of what are the overlaps both by geographic focus and the initiatives that people are a part of. So I can zoom in here, and you can see what those look like. And so from here, what a lot of people end up doing is saying, okay, this is interesting, but now I'm really interested in just looking at who's involved in Live Well. And so if I click and hold, now I'm zoomed in just on that initiative, and from here I could say, let me actually take one more step out. I'd like to go out 2 degrees. And so now what we're seeing is not just that what's immediately connected to Live Well, we can actually see what other collective impact initiatives come in next to a person like Bill or Aaron, what geographies come in, and you can keep doing that. You can keep stepping out degree by degree. I'm just hitting plus on my keyboard now, and that'll take me out another step. But it gives you some flexibility to both see that entire network and also zoom in on specific portions of it. One of the great things too, for systems maps, most people are actually building the map out by hand, but for something like this was actually all imported from a simple Excel spreadsheet that just has the first column is the name of people, and the columns off to the right are all the different attributes like collective impact initiative, geographic focus, and so that simple spreadsheet can actually be imported into Kumu and then use with clustering to make more of this network structure. So, Gene, that gives a good kind of overview of some of the different ways it's used. I'll show the help page here really quickly just so people know where to come if they want to explore a bit deeper. So this is located at help.kumu.io. You can hop in. We have use cases for systems mapping and network analysis. So, for example, this intro video actually walks through how to create a causal loop diagram using Kumu and some of the basic ways you can use decorations. And then if you go all the way to the home page, you'll see it'll kind of guide you both on a little introductory video of Kumu and also how you can get a little bit deeper into the different features. We've split it up into basics guides and also or into the basics and then more in-depth guides. And so walk down kind of in order if you're just getting started, and then switch down to the guides themselves when you're trying to get to a little bit more advanced understanding of some of the features.
Okay. Michael says he likes the idea of importing from a spreadsheet. Is there a template available?
There is, and so when you are actually in an editable map, so maybe I'll go to your STIA, STCP. Gene, I promise I won't actually import something and wreck this. The bottom right corner, that cloud, that's what you click on to do the import. Here, this at least shows you what the template looks like. It's not an actual Excel file that you're downloading on this page, but if I scroll down, you can see it shows you label, type, description, tags, from to, type, strength, and then if you go through the guide on the help page, there's two things. There's actually a video for how to do imports, and then let's see if this will let me click. There we go. There's a video to how to do imports, and then if you scroll down to the bottom, there's actually some links to sample files. So for example here you can see the example file for the PayPal and Mafia data that you saw before, and so that'll give you a sense of what that file structure looks like.
Okay. And for the help information itself, there's this question mark down here in the lower right-hand corner. If you click on it, it shows you the first level of help. So all of your shortcuts, the introductory video, all of your shortcuts, the advanced shortcuts, the help file that Jeff showed you, the link is right here. But then there's also some tutorials and the blog and the help map, which is very nice. Which, you know, it's always good if you can explain something in itself. So here's a Kumu map of the features of Kumu, which is very nice. Also, all of the maps or projects that Jeff has shown you today are actually, the links are all on the Kumu mapping entry point. This is the video and all of these links from the Tuesday session. The video for today will show up here, in a little while after this session. And just for convenience, I stuck all these links in the About section in the YouTube video also. So the other part that might be of interest is if you go to the main Kumu page, kumu.io, there's an option here called Explore, and the Explore page lists some current projects that people are working on. It's sort of a catch-as-catch-can list of things based upon what has been accessed. So some of them are interesting, and some of them are, like some of the test projects I do from time to time, where I do 2 or 3 things and then drop it and go do something else. But here's a map done by Bob Williams and someone who, on a new book they just released called Wicked Solutions, and this is a map about relationships with regard to the content of that book. So go stop by the Explorer and take a look from time to time. You want to, Scott? You want to, or Jeff? Jeff, you want to mention the intent for the visibility of public projects?
Yeah, for sure. So a lot of what we're trying to do with the public projects is really create a community. We're calling it more and more a community of creative problem solvers. And so the way to think about how Kumu works, public projects are always free. They always will be. This Explore page, we're working to improve it so that the dummy projects don't show up there. And eventually, too, we'll make it so that you can actually browse all of the public projects that exist out there, so you're not just limited to these top 20. You also have the members, the ability to browse the members. That could be helpful because when you go to a member profile, you actually get to see all of the public projects that they've ever created on that. So that's another great way to browse. If you see someone's work you like, it's essentially just kumu.io/their username, and that'll take you to that page. But yeah, you'll continue to see more and more improvements here, hopefully eventually getting to kind of full text search as well, and maybe some categorization so that instead of just browsing, you're actually able to see all the popular systems maps, network maps, maps that are working to solve economic problems, things like that.
And as I mentioned about Kumu being very deep application in terms of capabilities and continuing to seek out and discover things that it seems to be well suited to. Here's a project that was undertaken less than a week ago. For those of you who have been associated with Systems Thinking World and the endless ongoing discussion threads that just seem to go on and on and on and on, but don't go anywhere in particular, we're currently undertaking an experiment to figure out if we can use the Kumu environment to put a bit more order around discussions, models, and projects, whereby one would begin a discussion with an intent, though rather than simply allowing the discussion to go on and on forever, you end up with a context whereby you can actually summarize that discussion after some point in time. This is the summary of the first 44 posts that were done to this particular discussion, and after you look at that summary, if you want to make a comment, you can open this and make a comment, another comment, add it to the list right inside of that context, and then submit it, and then go back into the map, as opposed to being in somebody referred to it the other day as a disembodied discussion, which is completely abstracted from everything else without any related connection. And the same thing with Insight Maker models. If you're developing an Insight Maker model and you want a set of comments or perspectives from other people to help you further develop that model, we ended up taking the discussion feature out of Insight Maker because we couldn't keep up with the spammers. This is one example that was started, which is a model about new learning inhibited. So here is a link to the Insight Maker model itself that one can look at. And there is, the discussion hasn't been summarized because it was just started, but here is the discussion that's ongoing related to that particular model, and the link to the discussion can actually be put in the model, and a link back to this discussion element. All of the rest of the items on here are Kumu projects. Some of them probably have their own discussion dimension associated with them. At the moment, there are no connections between these because we just started this, and we believe that we will identify a set of tags or attributes that will allow one to come here and say, show me the relationships between these projects based upon this attribute, the same way that Jeff did with regard to this civic project, so that rather than us trying to sort of presumptuously decide beforehand what the relationships between the projects ought to be and which relationships would be of interest to other people, we will go ahead and allow people to help us understand what the relevant dimensions are, and then be able to come here and identify the discussions, models, and projects that are related to those dimensions. And this project's only a week old. It's very much in its infancy, but we're working on it. I don't know, there's a few people that are participating at the moment. When we do the Systems Thinking World announcement on Saturday or Sunday, I don't remember, Saturday or Sunday, wherever that is, we'll go ahead and tell the rest of the Systems Thinking World community about the current state of this development and ask them to provide comments. And to this point, it's been encouraging. We will see how it continues to develop.
Gene, do you want to spend just a little bit of time walking people through a quick example of like the really basic add an element, do the connection, the delay, and then the loop, just so they can see how that works? And I can talk just briefly about one of the things you'll see. There's really two ways to think about how you're working within Kumu. This idea of things being pinned in place and floating. The default ends up being floating. Gene, if you see on that left side of your map towards the bottom, you have the default to floating.
But you can change the default. You can?
Yep. Yeah.
So that you can tell it that you want it to be fixed, so that when you create an element, that element is fixed. So if you hit the bounce key to move things around, notice that the goal doesn't move anymore because it will stay wherever it is that you put it. All the rest of these are free floating, but so that you create a goal, you can create another element called current state, which is also fixed, and then you can either select an element and say you want to add a connection and tell it what you want to add the connection to, and it will make that connection. Though you can also default this to say that you want the connections to be directed as opposed to not directed. And when you create connections, you can also down here indicate that you want them directed. So now that I have, this points to this. Another way to create elements is simply to hold down the Alt key and select an element and drag out. All right. I mean, that's much quicker than going up here and doing add element and then add connection, so that you sort of do both at the same time. And if you're doing causal loop diagrams, then oftentimes you want to also indicate the state of, or the implications of the relationship. You could come in here and tell it that you want the type to be plus, so that it will go ahead and put the plus sign on the arrow for you. If you told it that you wanted a minus, it would make it a minus sign. If you wanted to indicate a delay, they also provided for that, so that you come down here and click on delay, and it puts a delay indicator on it. And beyond that, sometimes you actually want to style the links more. I have a preference for doing my positive links in blue and my negative links in red, so that you set up a you go ahead and you style them. That's probably, well, simply to go in and say that that I want to go to the perspective and I want to decorate the element. No, I don't want to decorate the element. Decorate the connection, and I want to decorate, what do I want to do here? Decorate all of the connections of type minus, and I want to make that red, so that now my red, all of my negative type connections are red. I mean, it's not extremely difficult to do, though I don't think it's completely obvious initially. Though, I mean, they've provided nice builders for you to walk through, so that. But then after a while, you spend time with it, and you simply learn to do the CSS script itself, and you write your own because it's actually faster, and you have more control over it.
Depending how apt for punishment you are, right?
Say again?
Depending how apt you are to punish yourself.
Yes. Well, I mean, I probably used the builders for a week or so, and then I went and looked at what they built, so that this decoration for the connection that I built, I then go in here and look, and someplace it says, oh, where is it?
At the bottom.
Okay. Connection type equals minus color, and that's the color. So, I mean, that's the format to specify a connection of a certain type that you want to be a color. So after you go build some stuff, you sort of recycle the learning based upon what was built, and you just sort of bootstrap it over time. Though the user's guide is also extremely good in terms of explaining how to work with perspectives. So it explains what the different components are, and what they do in terms of the extent that one has control over the pieces. Sorry, the wrong one. The reference page, in other words, you're able to govern the properties of elements, connectors, and loops. And here are all of the properties that you have access to through the CSS. So, I mean, it's an extremely rich environment in terms of being able to elaborate or style the map so that it makes it easier for it to convey the kinds of things that you were trying to get across. Robert has a question. Okay, with regard to, Robert asked a question about private and public attributes. You want to take that, Jeff?
Private and public attributes or projects?
Well, okay, do both.
Okay, so let me talk about attributes first. So there's this concept of having an attribute have a private visibility. What that does is that makes it so that only contributors or managers on an account see the attribute. We use it a lot for something like an image URL. We don't really want everyone viewing the map to see where that image is coming from, so we'll make that one private. For public projects versus private projects, think about public projects being anyone can view the map, anyone could add to the discussion that's related to the map, but you still get to pick who is actually invited into the account in terms of a contributor or a manager. And with private projects, no one can see that unless you invite them into that. And so it's another layer kind of removed. And so if you want someone to be view only, you add them as an observer, or if you want someone to actually be part of your team helping to build out your map, you can add them as a contributor. And both can be embedded. So this idea of you can have a public project or a private project, and we create what's called an iframe to allow you to embed a view-only interactive version in any other website. and those can be done whether or not it's public or private.
Okay. Are there any other questions to this point? Well, I hope very much that you have found it most informative. I thank you very much, Jeff. And
thank you, Gene. Thanks everyone for listening.
Mike says he's blown away by the possibilities, which is always a good thing, right?
Yeah, well, and please, and everyone please know, like this idea of, and just even the point that Gene brought up around decorations and how to make those easier to use, like that's something we're actively thinking about, actively working on. So as you're getting started, as you have ideas for things that can be improved, if you have questions, we're super easy to get a hold of. My email is just jeff@kumu.io. So feel free to reach out, and looking forward to being in touch.
Okay. And my recommendation is just go build something.
Mm-hmm.
It's very much like riding a bike. You can read books forever, but you'll never figure out how to ride a bike until you get on one. And so that you can study the user's guide, and you can wander around in Kumu maps forever, but you never really get the feel for it until you start building something. And to start with, it's amazingly easy. All you got to do is create two elements and make a connection between them, and you have your first map. Right? and I tell people that, I did a workshop with people, and I said, take out a piece of paper and draw a dot, and now label the dot Tom. And then now about 3 or 4 inches away from that, draw another dot and label it Jerry. Now draw a line, an arrow from Tom to Jerry, and on the arrow write Chases. And I said, you have now drawn your first model. If anyone feels nauseous, leave now. So, I mean, I will tell you that there was a point in time when my absolute worst enemy was a blank sheet of paper, because I simply wanted to make sure that what I developed was right, and I wanted to make sure that I started in the right place. And I had that problem for a long time until I realized it didn't make any difference where I started, because it was all connected anyway. So I can start any place that I want to, and as I interact with it over time, it will build out, and I will figure out what order to present the story once I figure out what the map's supposed to look like. So
right. Well, and it's another great example of the idea of the power of public projects, and I think it's called Cunningham's Law. But the fastest way to get a response is not to post a great question; it's to post the wrong answer. So by posting your map and having it be wrong, and people will be very likely to hop in and create a discussion and try to point out what the error is. So it's often a great way to refine your thinking.
Give other people an opportunity to show you how smart they are. Works wonders. So thank you all, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Great. Thanks.